Hello, everybody. How are you all doing tonight? Oh, now we got everybody all around the campfire. Let me tell you a story. A fitting story for a spooky night like tonight. This is a story about, let's just say, a disturbing young boy that, you do not want to cross paths with, ever. This story is called Be Die Sky. An odd name, I know, but bear with me, for it is a good story. Just a sip of water in real life. Let us begin. A couple of months back, I used to be a college teacher, teaching for computing and development. I wouldn't call myself a lecturer. I wasn't really good at talking to people for an hour, plus my lectures never really took place in a hall. Most of the time, it was one of my university's computer suites. Very much like a lesson in a normal IT class. Most of my days were spent showing my class how to design files, documents, and eventually code their own games. I have to tell you, it's pretty fun games seeing these guys start with their classes barely being able to not get code a game of noughts and crosses, and leaving after 3 years being able to make their own fully rendered 3D games. A little exercise I used to do at the end of the second year of the course would be to give the ROM documents of some very classic 2D games you would find on emulators, on forums, anywhere online. These ROMs range from Super Mario Bros. To Final Fantasy and everything in between. When I gave them the documents, I used to give them until the beginning of the next year to edit the documents in such a way that you'd be playing a different game completely, designing new levels and sprites, etc. This gave the students a chance to enjoy playing some old games while also learning how to code for themselves in their own interesting own creativity into their own pieces. Over the years of me doing this, I've had very mixed results. Depending on the level of the students, it ranged from a remake of Alien vs. Predator using mechanics from Contra and Ninja Gaiden, all the way down to a Pokemon game that was truly terrible attempts at changing the game in any way, with awful new Pokemon and glitchy gameplay which was almost painful to play through. Some of the students even tried to frighten me a few times by trying to make the game scary or disturbing somehow. Only one student managed to do that. It was late in the term when I set this particular piece of work for a relatively small class of mine. There were only 10 students in the class, 6 guys, 4 girls. They all seemed to get along pretty well. No animosity or bullying in the class at all. In smaller classes with older students, you usually find that. As I set the project over the summer, there was a mixture of excited and concerned faces. This was common amongst less confident students. One of the girls in the class called Kim even asked that if he, what I was looking for in games, in terms of gameplay elements from existing games. I always tell them the same thing, that I would try to stray away from the source material as far as they could, to allow them more creativity in the games themselves. I always gave them the analogy that I won't mark a piece very highly if you change the sprite of Sonic the Hedgehog to a gopher or make Mario a German plumber. I also say that sometimes the best way to innovate sometimes is to take something close to your heart, something which you truly enjoy. After I explained this, the class seemed more assured of what they needed to do. I adjourned the class, but called back one of my students. Let's call him Tom. He was a problem child in the class. He was extremely intelligent and very good at basic coding before he even started the class. However, he was very socially inept, usually sitting the side of the class, only really talking to the others when they asked him for help or were asked how it was. No one was mean to him, he just seemed to keep to himself. I asked him if everything was okay and if he understood the assignment, as the last few he had handed in hadn't been up to his usual high standards. He said that everything was fine, even saying that he had an idea for a completely original game to do for the project. That assured me that he would provide something interesting for me to play, and the prospect of an original game was very welcome. Too many times I've been sent a game that was just a redesign from a Mario Brothers claiming it was a new game, which wasn't very impressive for a student this stage of their teaching. Over the first month of the summer break, I always kept myself free so that my students can contact me via email if they have problems with the assignment I set them. I usually get a few questions on basic formatting, the students who miss classes, and for some asking me to test their game to see if it works. I usually say no to the latter of these, as it means I'm giving those students an advantage over the other students. It was at this point that I got an email from Tom. This was the first time since his application that I received an email from him. Like I said, he kept to himself, and he was always pretty good with understanding projects and assignments. He didn't need much prompting towards getting work done. However, Tom's email wasn't asking me for help. He wasn't emailing me to try this game. This is the message he sent me. Dear Sir, I am writing to you for two reasons. Firstly, I regret to say that I will not be rejoining your class for the New Year starts. This is due to an important matter of which I have to attend to. I wish I had enough time to complete your course, but my leaving is unavoidable. Secondly, I have completed the project you sent for the class before leaving. Although it will not count towards my final grade, I would like you to have a look at it. As I said in class, I think it's very original and based on something personal to me. However, I ask of one favor when you play this game. Please don't show it to anyone else. You will know why when you play it. Thank you. Tom. Attached to the file was an email with a file that said Be Dice Sky. This confused me greatly. What could have happened to him that would make him suddenly quit the course? And if he was in such a rush to quit the course, why did he send me his game? I should have questioned this more, but I was very tired. But I tried to stay out of the personal lives of my students as much as I possibly could to avoid complications. The files in the emails stayed there for a few days before my curiosity got the better of me. Although I no longer had to mark his work, he had left the course abruptly. The idea of an original game made the engines of old 2D games compelled me to take a look at it. I opened the file and surprisingly I could open it straight from the file itself. No need for an emulator, which was par for the course in which this project, so it was because it was easier to code and edit. When clicking on the main menu, simply named Be Dice Sky, My screen went to black for a few seconds, and as it loaded, a couple of seconds of this, the title screen appeared. The title screen seemed to be made of old children's play blocks and spelt the title of the game, Beat Die Sky. No spacing in it at all, and in all capitals. The background was very simple blue sky with some odd clouds here floating around. I pressed the start button, and the game started with the player in his room. I recognized the engine using this part of the game was the one for Pokemon Gold and Silver. The sprites were and surroundings, however, were completely different. The room was much more detailed than anything in the Pokemon games, and very realistic posters on the wall. A computer, bed, games, consoles, etc. It even had a stray sock and Coke cans on the floor. I felt relieved at this point that he had put so much work into it. Almost every single pixel on the screen had been changed. Nothing was reused from the old game, barring the model of the character sprites. And even that was heavily edited. The characters seemed to have light brown hair, red t-shirt with dark blue jeans, and white and red shoes. The sprite itself looked very much like Tom himself, which made me think that this is what he meant by saying that it was a game that was special and something personal to him. Like a fantasy adventure where he's the hero. Although I was impressed by the amount of detail put into this one screen of the game, the fact that he did this and suddenly left the course, despite all this hard work, worried me slightly more than before. As I moved the character around the room, it seemed quite fluent. There was no lag or glitches in the movement. I left the room and came to a corridor. Every room had its own flavor text. For example, Dad's room. He wouldn't be happy if I went in there without him asking first. And Eleanor's room. I hear snoring. She's probably resting after her night shift last night. I'll leave her to sleep. I was slightly impressed by all the work Tom had put into this game. I had barely been 2 weeks since I set the project, and it looks like very polished already. I couldn't go to any of the rooms or the corridors, so I went downstairs to a large open area where the first character, despite the one I was playing as, seemed to be receiving a hairline and glasses, was wearing a suit. I went over to him and began to talk to him. Dad. Good morning, Tom. Are you off to university today? Tom. Yeah, I will be soon. Dad. Ah, good. Just don't wake your sister. She had a tough shift last night. I had met Tom's dad before. He was asking some problems in class at the beginning of the course. It's strange to say, but I could almost hear his voice through the lines that came through the screen. Almost like this conversation had happened in real life between the two. It wasn't a massive piece of dialogue, but Tom wasn't really a big talker. After this, I left the house and began the shortcut scene of Tom, which is what the character in the game was called, on the bus. The music was innocent enough. It matched the ambience of the background, which was colorful and had lots of pastel colors on show. However, this changed it for a split second. When I looked at Tom, the sprite seemed that had closed his eyes. Suddenly, for half a second, the music changed to a static sound, and the background flickered between the colorful normal background and a navy blue void, with only Tom's sprite colored against the blue background. I assumed it was a glitch, as not as no one gets this kind of ROM hack completely right the first time, especially one as ambitious as this one. After this short bus journey game, Tom Sprite arrived at a large building with a billboard outside of it. It was where the game actually... This is where the game's accuracy became slightly concerning. Looking at the billboard, it turned out to be a map. An exact map of the university campus. I don't mean a rough outline of the picture. This was accurate down to the trees and benches in the center of the university. This level of accuracy surely wasn't healthy, especially in the short time this piece was set. It was bordering on obsession. As I entered the floor, and a word box opened up with the words "Objectives" in black capital letters. When I continued, the next line said, "Find Becky." This is when my slight concerns turned into panic. One of the girls in our class was called Becky. She was a smart enough girl, not amazing at the course, so asking Tom for a lot of help. As a teacher, I could see him staring at her a lot during class, and looking away nervously when she turned around. I thought this game would be some kind of sick wish fulfillment, a game where you would get the girl, which is fine as long as it stays within the game. I realized sounding a bit hesitant. I realized it sounded a bit hysterical. This part might seem like he's just trying to find his classmates and go to the lesson, so I pressed on and noticed the game suddenly changed. Although the sprites remained the Pokemon style, it now played like Metal Gear, a Nintendo game which focused mostly on stealth. All the other characters seemed to have a comb in front of which conveyed their sight, and Tom had to avoid these to reach the top of the screen and eventually Becky. However, the glitch from earlier re-emerged, but this time, every time the character was caught, there would be a small surge of static sound and the background would go back to black and blue, and the player would be sent back to the beginning of the room. This made me think of the glitch from the earlier screen to cover up the dying animation. Definitely programmed, or perhaps it was deliberately programmed to signify something. I don't know. When I finally managed to reach up the top of the screen, the game went back to the objective screen, and once with a much more sinister message. Objective: follow Becky without being seen. This led into a group of sprites standing in front of Tom, all of them looking like one or two of the students from the class. Standing in the middle of this row was a brown-haired girl with a blue shirt and a white skirt. This was Becky. It must have been. The focus of the game of this section was to find her, so it has to be her. The objective of this part of the game was frankly quite disturbing. What you needed to do was get close enough to the group to hear Becky talking without her noticing you, which is essentially a stalking game. Stranger still, when you got close enough to hear her, text boxes would appear with saying things. The ones I could remember was, "I'm so glad I got this last day of term. I have the whole house to myself for the rest of the week, so you can come over whenever." Becky: "I can't wait to get home. I didn't sleep too well last night. I kept thinking I heard rustling in the bushes out of my house." There were sentences like this every 10 seconds that you were undetected. and the same static sound of blue screen before you when you were noticed, along with a message simply reading as Becky turned around. Tom? This section lasted for about 5 minutes before going to a familiar door. As the group reached the door, I lost control of Tom. The next bit was creepily accurate. All the students entered the class, and then a sprite of me standing in front wearing the exact same clothes I was wearing on the last day of term. It became even creepier that the teacher, my sprite, recited the entire lesson I gave them, including setting the project for them all to do. At this point, I didn't really know how to feel. Was I even playing anymore? As the students left the room, the ejector stayed the same. Follow Becky without being seen. Only this time, it was a lot longer, leading out of the campus and to a house, where the girl ran inside with her friends. After this finished, the blue lasted a bit longer, as well as the static. It showed not only the sprite of the home itself, but it also showed Tom, with the outline of the house Becky entered. It felt like the house would play a bigger part in this game, and my gut told me in not a good way. The screen cut to black, and the next scene showed up in Tom's bedroom. The light was dark, only showing the outlines of items in the room. The flickers started again, but a bit more frequent, until the static sound stopped and the screen was permanently dark blue. This must have been what all the flashes of blue with static were conveying. The dream world. Tom got out of bed, and I encountered him again. I left the house, and there was another character standing at the door. This one looked creepily similar to Tom's sprite, but darker. I went to talk to him, and a series of text boxes appeared up. Tristan, you flaked out again, didn't you? You didn't go through with it. I knew you wouldn't. Why did I even trust you to do this in the first place? Listen, you know why you have to do it. I've given you so many reasons why you deserve it. Who's gonna miss them? No one. Who's gonna expect you, kind little Tommy, for such a thing? No one. It's foolproof. Don't make me take matters in your own hands. Get up and do it now. After this, there was a loud sound of static, and the screen cut to black. And it went back to the night, and in Tom's bedroom, although it was all back to normal. Well, as normal as it can be. This dream raised a lot of questions. Who was Tristan? What had Tom failed to do? Was he talking about Becky? Another classmate? Me? My questions would be soon answered. Tom Sprite got out of his bed and entered the screen and cut to black yet again. As my gut feeling earlier predicted, Tom Sprite now stood outside of Becky's house and moving around the windows. The game then gave me control of Tom for a short time. It went back to the stealth gameplay. I tried walking away from the house, but a huge hedge around Becky's window stopped me. I couldn't walk backwards. I could only go forwards into a small window. As soon as I reached the window, a screen cut to black, and suddenly I was inside the house. What is going on? I thought the pixelated was. I thought the pixelated was why the game even sent to me. Why did Tom send this to me? At this point, the game came out of the room and a sprite stood in the doorway. It was Becky. My heart sank. Almost like I was trying to prepare myself for the next scene. Becky began to speak. Who's there? Is that you, Tom? Why are you in my house? I've told you before, Tom. If you didn't stop following me, I would call the police. I saw you today following me and my friends. Now you've broken into my house. What were you going to do? That's it. I'm calling the police. Becky took a couple of steps into the room towards the phone. Then Tom spoke. No! After this, a battle scene appeared. This was by far the most disturbing part of the game. The battle played out one like in a Pokemon game, but instead of the sprite, there was a distinct pixelated image of a girl in floral pajamas and barefoot. Each player had a health bar, but no numbers underneath them, only the names above. Tristan, "Stop her now, idiot!" appeared from the bottom of the screen, and the menu showed up. The only option was fight. And Tom only had one heart. And one attack. Punch. I hesitantly used it. A big chunk was taken out of Becky's health. The movement through. Becky, what are you doing? After this, I lost control of the battle. I was helpless now. Just an onlooker. Becky used run, but it failed. Tristan, stop her now. Tom, I'm sorry. Tom uses punch. Becky, please stop. You're hurting me. Tommy. Becky used run, but it failed. Tom, don't make me do this. Tristan, she can't leave now. Tom uses strangle. Strangle? This wasn't even an option when I had control. It was also at this point that Becky's sprite changed. She was now laying on the ground, propping herself up with her elbow, with her hand held out, as if to say stop. Her face was battered and bruised, and she looked petrified. Becky, no, please, no. Becky used struggle, but it failed. After this, the scene faded to black for a long time. It felt like an eternity. It gave me a chance to try and figure out just what was happening. I still couldn't get my head why Tom even sent me this. Was this a sick joke? Has he actually committed a hideous crime? The screen came back on to show Tom in a forest at night, over a patch of dug-up earth, a spade within his left hand. For about 10 seconds of the screen, a text box appeared at the bottom. I'm sorry, this wasn't supposed to happen. Tom sprite and then ran away, and the text at the bottom of the screen. As the title then lowered from the top was the blocks that spelled Be Die Sky. Suddenly, the blocks began to spin, distorting the letters, and then they stopped. The words was a very different message. A message that I will never forget. Becky is dead. After the screen, I shut down the game and checked my university email account. I went through all my messages before Tom's to see one that came through the university. asking for people to come forth if they knew the location of a missing student, Rebecca Dale. I rushed to my phone to call the police and report what I had just witnessed, and that I may have a lead on the student's disappearance. I unplugged my laptop and took it to the police station, hoping the game was more of a warning sign of what Tom was planning to do rather than what he had already done. But I was too late. I am writing this several months later after the incidents for several reasons. Firstly, it's only really taken me until now to fully grasp what I was involved with. The news of Tom's trial had come much sooner than I expected. They found him, apparently north of where we were hiding in a small abandoned house. I gave my evidence in court and then left the proceedings on that day. I avoided eye contact with the young man, but I could feel his eyes burning into the side of my head. A few days after I appeared, the full story was reported on every national paper. I read the story just to see what had transpired. The headlines read, "Game Killer 20 charged with murder of a student." As I read further, the whole grisly business took place outside of the game. Thomas Alexander was reported seeing enter Dale's house at 2:05 a.m. early Saturday morning. A neighbor had reported disturbance when they heard a door open at the rear of the house. Alexander claims that he was encouraged to commit the murder by an incompetent named Tristan. The police could find no evidence to back up his claim, but his father had claimed that Thomas had suffered from schizophrenia at a very early age. It was told by doctors it was controlled by his medication. Dale's body was found buried in a shallow grave in the woods bordering on the university where she used to study. A teacher alerted the police that a game sent to him by Alexander 2 weeks after the murder had taken place. All of this made me feel sick to my stomach. I felt like I had been part of this whole crazy plot. I felt paranoid, almost as if Tom was coming after me. Now that I had handed the police the game, even though he said to tell no one. I hadn't slept in days. I asked the police whether I could be relocated somewhere where Tom couldn't find me if he ever got out of prison. I was put into the witness relocation program for 3 days after the court had cast their sentence. Although I am much more relaxed in my new life, I can never forget what had happened. Recently, while rereading some of my reports on the case, there was a paragraph at the bottom of which I had been neglected to look at. It was after the ridiculed description. There was the passage after the gruesome description of how Tom had disposed of the body is where I was enough for me to stop reading out of disgust. I read further this time, and the pain and torment came rushing back, and it all hit me all with one line. While looking over the data of the game, researchers had found a picture file showing the deceased in the woods. She was buried and her face heavily bruised, bloodied, and the clothes torn, presumably from the attack. This line filled me with dread. I looked over my old email address, which the police told me not to use anymore. I'd found the files that Tom sent me. Sitting beside the game, I hesitantly clicked on the picture "I'm sorry.jpg. To this day, I still haven't opened the picture. It torments my mind of its contents, but I refuse to open it, just in case it lets Tom back into my thoughts. Through this way, I can be rid of Tom forever. And that was Be Die Sky.
Read to you by
Damn.
SJ-95 fighter known as Carmo.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.